do this. We open our film with Anakin here, standing on top of the Sphinx, telling us how wonderful his life is. We then flash back to Anakin's awkward teenage years. See, he's supposed to bring balance to the Force or something, but then there's this girl he likes, and things start getting really weird. He gives a snow globe to this girl that he likes, who only dreams of traveling the world and seeing sights, when a ridiculously over-the-top bully takes it from her, loudly announces to everybody that, "Hey everybody, look, Anakin bought this girl a present, isn't that adorable?" And then he throws it out onto some ice. Okay, I know high school is tough for a lot of people, but was it ever this cartoonishly evil? When Anakin goes out on the ice to get the globe, with the girl screaming, "No, don't go," the ice breaks underneath him, and he goes into the water. Right before he can drown, though, Anakin magically teleports himself into a library, along with a ton of water. And the best part about this, there's a large number of people in the library when he suddenly arrives, along with all of this water. People hear him arrive. I'm not sure if anybody actually sees it, but they see the water that comes out of nowhere, and nobody says anything, and he just casually strolls out of the building. He then goes home to Yondu, who's his father. I think we're supposed to get the impression that Yondu is an abusive dad. He just seems to be a little shouty, so maybe it's just emotional abuse. And you now pretty much know everything you need to know about that character. When his dad comes busting into his room for one reason or another, Anakin teleports back to the library again. Believe it or not, the fact that twice in one day he's been magically able to teleport to the library makes him start to wonder if possibly he has the ability to teleport to the library. Anakin is super smart. Anakin decides to use his powers and a small store of cash he's been saving up to run away from home. But first he visits the girl he likes, which is a great thing, because right now, everybody but his father thinks he's dead. Right? And while they didn't push him out on the ice, the girl and the bully have to feel responsible. That's how the human brain works, right? If I hadn't thrown that out on the ice, he'd still be alive. If he hadn't bought me a present, he'd still be alive. If I had somehow stopped the bully from picking on him, he'd still be alive. So, if they are normal human beings, right now, those two people have to be under the impression that they are partially responsible for the death of one of their classmates. They have to be devastated. He doesn't actually say anything to her. He leaves the snow globe on the swing, throws a rock at her window, and vanishes. Presumably shattering her sanity for years to come. Because now, she's not sure if he's dead or not. Right? That's the snow globe. So, he's not dead, but if he's not dead, where is he? I watched him go under, how could he not be dead? Smooth move. Anakin rides a bus to the big city and rents himself a cheap apartment with money he had stashed away. Okay. Let's try this at home, kids. I want you to save up your allowance for a year or two, then go to New York City and snag yourself an apartment. Now, it's okay if it's dirty and shady, but I want you to go to New York and somehow manage to secure yourself an apartment with a wad of bills that you saved up from your allowance. Please. We then get some scenes of young Anakin trying to master his powers in a park, in the open, where people are walking around, and they can see him. He's not very good at this. Next, he plans to rob a bank, which is, honestly the next logical step. I'm not picking on that. So he goes into a bank and asks if he can use a restroom. The security guard then escorts him down into the basement, where the bathroom apparently is, right next to a giant vault full of money. Okay, so you're a New York bank, and the only restroom you have for customers to use requires a security escort through the basement. So, anytime you have a customer that needs to use the bathroom, you lose your security force while they're escorted to the basement. Also, I worked in a bank. 99% of them do not have a vault full of money. They've got a safe with like $100,000 in it. any excess is sent off to the Federal Reserve. We know Anakin isn't smart enough to research this. Plus, he doesn't have, a smartphone or the internet, so he'd have to go to a library, which we didn't see. He just happened to pick the one bank with stupid security, a vault full of cash, and a bathroom in the basement. The movie is never really clear on how jumping is achieved exactly. At first, it seems to imply that he has to know the place very well, like the library or his room at home. Then we see him teleporting to places he's actually looking at. Later, we see he has a bunch of pictures up on the wall that he can use to teleport to specific locations. But now, he's teleporting inside a bank vault that he barely saw the inside of when he walked past it for a couple of seconds. So, does he need to know where he's going? Does he need to be familiar with it or not? They never line out the rules to this. Luckily for him, unlike every bank I've worked in, this bank doesn't have motion sensors. And he's not worried about video cameras because he doesn't bother covering his face. A beanie is all he needs for security purposes. He then proceeds to steal so much money it can barely fit in his room, which is perfect. Provided you don't think anyone else, like a landlord, is going to come into your room ever, especially considering how much noise this teleporting back and forth is making, and that nobody will ever be able to see into your room when you open or close the door, or, report to the police there's these weird noises going on next door. This is grade A planning. And now we meet our main antagonist for the movie, Samuel L. Jackson, who's investigating the bank robbery. He'll be back later. Then we cut back to the present. We're now with grown-up Anakin living large on all his stolen money in a fancy penthouse with walls plastered with photos so he can jump to them. Because again, sometimes he needs photos, but sometimes he doesn't. Which would make sense if he could only jump to places he knew really well, but we just saw that that's not the case because he jumped into that bank vault that he knew nothing about. I don't know the rules of this jumping thing, and the movie's not going to help me. He decides to test out the nightlife in London, and he sees a pretty girl at a bar, so he teleports halfway across the crowded room to stand next to her. Again, in public, where everyone can see him. And nobody notices except this one guy. I'm sorry, I feel like if I was in a crowded room full of people and somebody was just teleporting around, I would notice it out of my periphery, right? Or especially in a room that full of people, somebody's going to be looking in his general direction. But no, everybody in the world except that one guy is completely blind to this random teleporting fella. And now he's eating lunch on the Sphinx again. It's a major tourist attraction. Does nobody see that there's a lounge chair sitting at the top of it? Back to Samuel L. Jackson. It turns out he's working for a secret organization that hunts down and kills jumpers. They have special electrocuting snares that prevent jumpers from using their powers. Oh, and there are other jumpers. So, yeah. Now, you may be wondering, why does this secret organization exist? Why does it hunt down jumpers? We're about to discuss the primary motivation of our enemies in this film, all right? It's the driving force that leads them to hunt down our hero.
Only God should have the power to be all places at all times.
And there's the major flaw in this movie, our villain's motivation. Jumpers are presuming to have the power of God because they can be in all places at all times. Two reasons this doesn't work. A, their powers would have to come from God, right? If God has a plan and God designed us and God made the world, if there is an omnipresent God who is directly responsible and who would care about such things as people using his powers, wouldn't those abilities be part of his plan? Wouldn't he have placed them down here? Wouldn't he in some way be involved? Could he be an all-powerful God if humans can just usurp abilities that are meant only for him? Also, if there is an all-powerful God in this universe, why does he need Samuel L. Jackson's help? And if he isn't an all-powerful God, why does he deserve Samuel L. Jackson's help? But that's not even the real problem here. The real problem is B. Jumpers are not in all places at all times. I defy you to watch this movie and at any point show me when any of the jumper characters are in all places at all times. They are only ever in one place at a time. They just have a super efficient way of moving from one place to another. They are never in all places at all times, which is the villain's stated reason for hunting them down. They are not omnipresent. They're unipresent. Just like every other human being. So, our villain's motivation in this movie makes 0 sense. We're only 20 minutes in. This is gonna hurt. When Anakin gets home, he finds Sammy waiting there for him. Turns out Samuel L. Jackson's been trying to hunt him down for 8 years, ever since the bank vault thing. 8 years. This super secret black ops organization that we later learn has been hunting jumpers since medieval times has spent 8 years trying to catch a guy who regularly, routinely, without hesitation, uses his powers out in the open where anybody can see them and makes no attempt to protect his identity whatsoever. So not only do the villains not have actual proper motivation, they actually have no ability to be villains. We just watched Samuel L. Jackson kill another jumper in cold blood. But here, he's broken into Anakin's apartment, has proof that Anakin robbed the banks using his powers, and instead of trying to kill him or surprise him and get the jump on him, he just wants to chat. Dude. If I may call you dude, Mr. Jackson. And Mr. Jackson, I realize this isn't your fault, this is the writing. We cool? If you're trying to kill somebody who can teleport to the other end of the globe at a second's notice, don't you want the element of surprise? Because we saw the dude you were electrocuting trying to jump and failing. But you could still tell he was a jumper because parts of him semi-disappeared. So why don't you immediately hit Anakin with the snare? Then, when you see him try to jump and fail, you know for sure he's a jumper and you can just kill him. Why do you need to take the time to talk to him? See if he's a witch. If he's a witch, burn him! You guys are really bad at this! Finally, Sam starts torturing Anakin with a taser, demanding to know who's been helping him hide. Sam. Man. Really? He's been doing everything but wearing a giant flashing neon sign that says, "I can teleport," for the last 8 years, and you think he's some kind of criminal mastermind? Anakin barely manages to escape by teleporting back to his old room at his dad's house. Yondo hears the teleporting coming in, but can't see him, because he can't get the door open. Yondo is obsessed with reuniting with his son, and tries to talk to him through the other side of the door that's been chained shut. Small issue. The last time we saw this door, Yondo had broken the chain by kicking the door open. So, at some point in the last 8 years, Yondo repaired the door frame, reattached the chain, and then, I guess, climbed out of the window so that he could leave the interior of the room with the door chain shut? Yondo's worried that he's going crazy, and he begs his son to come home where it'll be safe and everything will be okay. And the only measure of compassion that Anakin gives to his father is yelling, "You're not crazy," and then vanishing before Yondo can see him, shattering yet another person's sanity. Going through his personal effects, Samuel L. Jackson finds a photo of the girl from high school. Anakin, at exactly the same time, decides that after 8 years of not contacting her and everybody else believing that he's dead, it's time to reconnect with that girl. This girl is about to become a large part of the story, so we probably should give her a name. How about Plot Device? Because Anakin is super clever, he now knows that somebody is trying to track him down. So now is the exact time to reconnect with his pre-jumper identity. Because nobody trying to track you down would ever try tracking your identity through the friends and family that you grew up with. Anakin decides to visit Plot Device at the bar she works at, but doesn't actually approach her. I mean, he just told her mother that he was alive. Why bother healing what is probably a deep psychological wound in Plot Device? But on the way out of the bar, he runs into the bully. Keep in mind, the bully still believes he killed this boy 8 years ago by being an asshole. Anakin tries to get away by saying, mistaken identity, which is fair since the two actors playing Anakin at the two ages look absolutely nothing alike. Plot device overhears the commotion and comes over. Okay. The bully just learned that he didn't murder somebody 8 years ago. Plot device just learned that she wasn't responsible for somebody's death 8 years ago. And she's not crazy. He really did survive. He didn't die, and she's been carrying this guilt around all this time for no reason. How do they react to learning this? This life-changing event. No big deal. Welcome back, buddy. Come on, have some human feelings! Bully is drunk and actually slaps plot device on the ass while ordering another drink, leading Anakin to punching him, leading to a big fight, because again, Anakin is on the run from a super-secret organization that's tracking him down, so the first thing he wants to do is draw a lot of attention to himself in the town where he grew up. Anakin is losing the fight, so he tackles and teleports the bully into the bank vault he originally robbed in front of everybody. And everybody is watching this fight. You could try to argue that previously, just by luck, because he never checked, nobody happened to be looking in his direction when he teleported, which would be phenomenal luck for 8 years. But this time, everybody is gathered around watching the fight, and Anakin tackles and teleports the guy in the fight. Anakin then leaves the bully in the bank vault to teach him a lesson, I suppose. Except now, there's a guy in a bank vault who knows Anakin can teleport, knows Anakin's real name, where his dad lives, the girl he's got a crush on, and he's left this guy at the scene of his first crime, which Samuel L. Jackson told him he knows about. This is the dumbest possible thing to do. He has literally taken his life history and given it to the organization that's trying to hunt him down. There's a scene later on in the movie. I skipped it because it wasn't worth it, because I feel like I made the point here, where he does later confront the bully and demand to know, what did you tell them? What did you tell them? What did you tell them? And the bully finally says, I told them everything. Why wouldn't I? And that's valid. He was about to be arrested for trying to rob a bank. Why wouldn't he tell them everything he knows about this magical teleporting friend who threw them in there? And Anakin loses his shit. Like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you see that coming? Apparently, plot device, along with all the other people who were looking directly at him, missed the teleporting act. So she and Anakin start talking and catching up. And at no point does she fly off the handle about, I thought you were dead. I thought I was responsible for your death, and then I thought your ghost visited me and gave me a snow globe. I thought I was crazy. No. Instead, he says, hey, you want to go to Rome? And she says, sure. And then, surprise, surprise, Samuel L. Jackson sits down with the bully and learns all of Anakin's personal details. For the first time, there are direct consequences to Anakin flaunting his abilities and putting zero forethought into anything that he does. Great. Alright, this is a minor point, but it happens like 3 times in rapid succession, and it kind of gets on my nerves. Anakin's cover story for all the money that he has is that he's in banking, which plot device doesn't buy, because she knows he failed algebra. This happens a couple times. You know, I'm in banking. I can't believe you're in banking. You failed algebra. I worked in banking. I wasn't that great at algebra. Oddly, not a lot of algebra involved in banking mathematics. It's a lot of addition and subtraction. Additionally, if you have a ton of money working in banking, it's because you're upper management, which involves even less math, at least on a daily basis. Presumably, you can use spreadsheets and calculators and things. But you use even less algebra. At no point when I worked at a bank did I see anybody have to solve for X to do their job. So can we please stop bringing this up? Now I'd like to show you some of the amazing chemistry these two actors share.
Well, l'ingresso means come on in.
Oh, I thought I meant bullshit.
Well, no.
Oh, isn't that called acting? While Anakin is using his powers to break his girlfriend into the Coliseum, we come across another jumper. This other jumper is actually a major character in the movie and is never given a name. So we're going to call him Max, just because later he's driving a car and Max Rockatansky drives cars. Anyway, we saw Max earlier, and he's apparently been able to track Anakin down from the London bar where he noticed him to the Coliseum. And considering the bad guys are about to show up, apparently they can also track jumpers down, despite the fact that they couldn't find him before. This tracking is never explained, and it never comes up again. But somehow, Max and the bad guys were both able to figure out that he was in the Coliseum somehow. No, you're not going to help me out here, movie? When the bad guys do show up, Max reveals that they're called Paladins.
What's a paladin?
What follows now is a battle between Anakin, Max, and the Paladins, all while Plot Device silently waits for Anakin to come back to her. After the battle, Anakin is arrested for breaking into the Coliseum. Who could have predicted that wacky turn of events? While the officers are out of the room, Anakin's mother shows up, who we haven't met before, but luckily Anakin goes, "Mom?" And she gives him the keys to his handcuffs and tells him he has 30 seconds to get out before the Paladins show up. Then she vanishes. Anakin is as in the dark as we are at this point. Deciding that things are too dangerous now, Anakin puts Plot Device on a plane and then he leaves. Normally this would be a smart move, right? Like, this is where I'd be like, finally, the character does something that makes sense and gets rid of the dead weight that's going to potentially hold him back and keeps her out of danger. Except, they've now interviewed the bully, which means they know Plot Device's name, they know that he cares about her, and they can use her to get to him, and he just sent her home, the easiest place for them to find her. While interviewing Yondo, Samuel L. Jackson comes across a photo of Anakin's mom, and the music tells us this is incredibly important. But I'm not entirely sure the music can be trusted, because let's see how this scene ends.
If I hear anything, I'll be sure to give you a holler.
No, you won't.
No, I won't.
Maybe a special movie you can do on this new thing now.
Yeah, that wasn't me. It's that big dramatic build-up, and then it cuts to the next scene. The next scene being a scene between Anakin and Max that establishes nothing and does no good. Then, after all that big words, big sound and fury leading to nothing, then cutting to a nothing scene, we do cut back to have Anakin come home to find his father knocked out, maybe dead, and the place is messed up a little bit. So there was a decent fight scene between Yondo and Samuel L. Jackson. We just didn't get to see any of it. Any director will tell you that it's always best to keep your good action off screen, because you don't want to overexcite your audience. Long story short, Anakin teams up with Max to take down Samuel L. Jackson before they can get to Plot Device, and credit where it's due. This driving sequence where Max is repeatedly jumping the car around is actually pretty neat. It looks neat. I don't have anything bad to say about it. Well done on putting together the action sequence. Actually, the jumping action sequences in this film are decent. They're well made. Some of them are actually pretty fun to look at. It's revealed that different jumpers have different strengths. Max can jump anything that moves. If it's a vehicle and it's in motion, he can jump it, doesn't matter how much it weighs. He then tells the story of a guy who once tried to jump a building and died in the attempt. I'm sure that won't come back up.
My dad,
Did I ask about your family? I mean, are we on Oprah here, or...?
Okay, Max is officially the best character in this movie. In order to save Plot Device, Anakin breaks into her apartment, sees that the Paladins are coming, reveals his abilities to her, and jumps her out of there into Max's lair. He kidnaps her to save her. Only, it turns out that the Paladins have a way to, open jump scars or whatever's left behind shortly after a jumper uses his abilities. If they do it quickly enough, they can force it open and travel through themselves. So this is going to be bad. So now, our heroes are hiding from the Paladins in Max's lair. And I have to ask, why? The whole point of this movie is that they can jump. The machine that opens a rift, A, takes a while to work, and B, it doesn't seem to travel through the rift itself, or at least they didn't bring it through. So, you make several jumps in quick succession, and by the time they get the machine to warm up and let them through the first one, the second or third one are probably healed by then, and you can be on some nice remote tropical island. Or, when you jump away from them, jump for a fraction of a second to the bottom of the ocean, then jump somewhere else. They will open a rift to the bottom of the ocean will either pour through or drown them, or they'll go through and drown themselves on the other side, depending on how those rifts work, if they're both directions or whatever. And now maybe you're saying, well, they don't have time to think about that. They're panicked. They're in trouble. They have to make split-second decisions. Here's the problem with that. Max has been hunting paladins for years. Max knows they have this machine. Max knows how it works. And we earlier established, I didn't show you, but trust me, Max likes to jump paladins to the bottom of the ocean to dispose of their bodies, which is where I came up with the idea. I got the idea to solve the bad guy problem from a character in the movie who hasn't thought of it yet. Also, Anakin can jump his girlfriend. He grabbed her hand, jumped with her. So what's to prevent them from jumping behind Samuel L. Jackson, touching him on the shoulder, then jumping him a couple miles above the surface, and then jumping away and letting him fall to his death? This movie should be about 5 minutes long. Yes, the bad guys have a way to neutralize jumpers if they can see them and get a shot off, whereas the jumpers can teleport in fractions of seconds. Just boom, 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 boom. How is this even a match? Hell, you could just have Max drop a bus on him. He can move anything that moves, right? Have him grab a bus, drop it on Samuel L. Jackson. Again, Max is easily the best part of this movie. Of course, we take a break in the middle of our epic battle sequence for some awkward love story stuff between Anakin and Plot Device, only to learn again that some awesome fighting took place off camera. Thanks for that. Anyway, Plot Device ends up back in enemy hands, to which Max's response is, yeah, sorry about that, but we got a chance to blow them all up, so I'm gonna drop this bomb on them. No more paladins. Sorry about your girlfriend. I'm kind of okay with this. So we missed the epic fight that Max had versus the paladins, but we do get to watch the whiny baby fight between Max and Anakin as they try to take control of the device that'll blow up the bad guys. Excellent choice. And honestly, can I stop here for a second? I'm going to do some actual analysis. I didn't write this down. This is completely off script. And I'm going to try and make it quick. Anakin's an asshole. He's the main character, and he's an asshole. Now, it's easy to make a joke and blame it on bad writing or bad acting or whatever. But let's give it some credit and let's actually dive into this. As a teenager, he developed the ability to jump and spent the next 8 years getting anything he wants whenever he wants it. He's never had to wait for anything. Now, that kind of freedom and power is going to regress a person, right? We learn from conflict. We grow through adversity. The difference between a wise man and a naive one is experience and life and burdens, right? So Anakin hasn't grown. If anything, he's regressed. The very best case is he's a 15-year-old, emotionally, mentally. There is a scene earlier on when he's asking Max for help. I skipped it because I knew I was going to talk about it here, or at least I thought I might. He's asking Max for his help because Max knows what the hell's going on, but he's being an asshole about it because he's an asshole. And you want to stop and say, hey, you're asking for help, how about you not be a jerk for 5 seconds? But it's the first time in 8 years he's had to ask anybody for anything. So it actually kind of works, right? If the writers of this movie made him an asshole Because of this, because the reason that he would legitimately be one, getting those powers at that age, and then having unfettered access to anything he wants for that period of time, they get some points for that. That's how humans work. It's the first time in the movie they've actually written a human how humans work, but yes, that would work. Here's the problem. Your main character's an asshole. People don't root for assholes. There's exceptions. But if you're going to be an exception, you have to be really good at writing it, and these guys aren't. You want the audience to root for your main character, right? That's how they engage. If your audience isn't emotionally engaged with your story, if they're not rooting for somebody, if they're not hoping for somebody to succeed, then your movie isn't having any real impact on them. It's just washing over them. If your audience isn't emotionally engaged, then it's not a good movie. I mean, it's that simple. At the very best, it's bland. Look at the pretty colors. Okay, I'm done. It's not a story that will stay with you. They aren't characters that you're going to care about. If your main character is an asshole, your audience isn't going to care about your movie. Or, here's an example. You have an asshole, and the asshole says, I want to do X. And another character comes up and says, I don't know about X, how about Y? If this other character is not also an asshole, the audience is going to immediately, at the very least, go, yeah, what about Y? I mean, let's look at Y. Let's talk about Y. Because I get the feeling the filmmakers really wanted us to think that Max was an extremist. We're not supposed to side with Max because his solution is over the top. It's extreme. He is now part of the problem. Which is why, after this fight, Max is never seen again. Because we're not supposed to care about him. But we spent time with Anakin. We know Anakin's an asshole. So when another character comes along and says, I have a different solution than the asshole, and I'm not an asshole, you're going to care about that character more than the main character. I guess that's my point. I mean, that's... And I'm sorry to bring actual analysis into what's meant to be a funny, shouty, yelly review. But that's really the point. Audiences need somebody to root for. When you have a movie without a hero, without a protagonist, it can be an anti-hero. We can root for anti-heroes. You can occasionally root for assholes, but they have to be noble assholes, right? When you don't have these things, a movie can't have any real impact. So there you go. Now go write your movies and make sure your characters have something likable about them, a redeeming quality, something an audience can either latch onto and say, I see myself in this, or I see something I want to be in this person. Either one of those gets you audience engagement. The movie has very clearly told me I'm supposed to be supporting Anakin, but it hasn't told me why. After barely winning the fight with Max, Anakin steps right into the middle of Plot Device's apartment to try and free her from the Paladins and is immediately captured. I mean immediately captured. Almost like it was a trap and they were waiting for him. How could he have possibly foreseen that? Plot Device then apologizes because she was rude to him earlier in the whole, I just want to go home, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. She apologizes because... Let's track this down now. In the past couple days, the guy that she thought she was partially responsible for the death of shows up. Turns out he's been fine this whole time and living a good life, in fact. Invites her on a date to Rome. Then gets arrested for shady activities and breaking and entering into a national monument. Reveals to her that he's a bank robber, shoves her on a plane, then breaks into her home, kidnaps her, reveals that he's got supernatural powers, which directly leads to her getting attacked by a secret organization, which then directly led to her apartment getting utterly destroyed by Max and a flamethrower. So she apologizes to him because now she loves him. all that stuff I said about maybe they get points for writing a realistic human growth pattern, clearly they don't know how to. So the entire movie, it's been made clear to us that electricity prevents jumpers from using their powers. Paladins have been hunting jumpers since medieval times. They know how their powers work. They know how to stop them. You can't jump when you're caught in one of their little electrical snares. We also learn that the only person to ever try to jump a building died in the attempt because there's only so much you can do. So now, at our climax of our film, Anakin, who is caught in 5 electronic snares from 5 different paladins, successfully teleports the apartment and a good chunk of the surrounding building to the bottom of a river. He does this by using the super special powers of being the main character. Do I even need to go on a rant about how lazy this is from a writing perspective? It's impossible to do A. And it's impossible to do B. But at the very end of our movie, in the big climax, we'll have our character do A squared, or A to the 5th power, plus B. Thank God this movie is almost over. And I know in videos in the past I've talked about the except that one time rule of writing, which is an interesting way, and you can go find the video where I talked about it in depth. It's an interesting way to establish lore in your created world, or to give you plot hooks. The idea that whatever rule you come up with, you always say except for that one time, because that one time is a decent story, and even if you don't tell it, it can be a part of the mythology of your world. And this sounds like I'm arguing against that, because we said this can't happen, and then it does. The difference is, the except for that one time can't just flare up right at the end. It's like, no, all of a sudden now I can break all the rules established in this world just 'cause. Except for that one-time principle, the idea is there's a character to whom that rule doesn't apply, period. Or they grow to break it. You don't just get the Deus Ex Machina at the end where, boom, rules of the universe broken 'cause I'm the main character, bitch! So Anakin teleports the building to the bottom of the river, then teleports part of the building along with plot device back to the library. Only Samuel L. Jackson is the only surviving paladin, and he's along for the ride. Anakin then teleports Samuel L. Jackson to a cave in the middle of the Grand Canyon, where he just, I guess, hopes that Samuel L. Jackson doesn't have a satellite phone or some other method of contacting his super secret organization. How does this resolve anything? The guy dedicated to destroying you for who you are, for the powers you innately possess, is still alive. He has shown that he will stop at nothing to destroy you, and he's still out there. That is not a plot resolution. Doesn't matter. Time for the ending. Our final scene involves Anakin walking up to this house to meet Bella. Anakin then reveals that he's actually a mummy. And now there's a love rectangle where Bella has to choose between Edward Jacob or Anakin, vampire, werewolf, or mummy. No, not actually. This is just where Anakin's mom lives. And now, at the very end of our movie, we just start dropping stupid bombs. Just stupid after stupid after stupid. Anakin's mom is a paladin, and presumably a very important one. Now, the smart people among you may be thinking, well, that's why they couldn't track him down, because she was covering his tracks. And yes, there are 2 times in the movie, one implicit and one implied, where she does help him hide. But he and Max both repeatedly use their powers out in the open where anybody can see them, constantly. There's even a scene where Max gets up in a little girl's face and goes, boo, before teleporting. They're not hiding themselves. And yet, the Paladins couldn't track him down for 8 years. I don't care how much she's helping. If he's that out in the open, why couldn't they find him? And then they tracked him to the Colosseum in Rome. Arguably, Samuel L. Jackson did some interviews and found out that plot device went to Rome. They found him in the Colosseum in Rome, straight to him. So they have the ability to find him, as did Max, somehow. But again, never explained. Right? She can't have helped hide him that much. Second, it's revealed that Anakin started jumping at the age of 5. At the age of 5, he made his first jump, and that's when she left home because she is a paladin, so she believes that his powers need to be destroyed, but it's her own son, so she just left. Okay. I have memories from the age of 2. Maybe that's uncommon. But I'd like to think that if at the age of 5 years old I could teleport, I'd remember that. But no, he teleports a little bit at the age of 5, and then completely forgets he has this ability for 10 years. This was an absolutely ridiculous plot device when the TV show Charmed tried to use it, and it's equally stupid here. Next, how did he find out where she lives? She's a high-ranking member of a top-secret organization living under an assumed name. How did he look up her address? Google Maps? Finally, she reveals that now she's going to be hunting him. Presumably, this is setting us up for a sequel for the franchise. She just said she's been protecting him for the last... since he was 5. She's been protecting him. He says, so what now? Well, now I'm going to give you a head start. So you've been protecting him, but now you're not going to protect him anymore. You're going to hunt him down. Now the gloves are off. Why? No reason. Don't know. Just 'cause. That's how character motivations work in this. We believe whatever we need to believe for the plot to be cool, I guess. 2 more questions. What happened to Max? I liked Max. He was the most relatable character in this movie. But after their battle, Anakin teleports him into an electrical thing and gets away, and we never hear from or about Max again. What happened to Anakin's dad? We don't know for 100% sure that he was dead. Anakin comes home, finds his dad on the floor, unconscious or not, we don't know, teleports him to a hospital, yells he needs help, and that's the last we see of him. Are we not supposed to care about these characters? Can we just get a little bit of closure over what happens with the characters that aren't Anakin? The characters that aren't assholes? The characters that we could potentially care about? Or are we just supposed to wait for the sequel that thankfully never happened? This movie was awful. None of the characters have actual human motivations. 2 characters who thought they might be responsible for the deaths of somebody recognize him 8 years later and are just like, sup. The enemy's main motivations are that they're trying to be like God, which doesn't make any kind of sense at all, as we addressed. He decides, after 8 years of silence, to go back to his one true love. It was always her, despite the fact that I haven't talked to you or about you in 8 years. The mom, I left you because I love you, but I didn't love you enough to prepare you for what was coming and to train you and teach you about the world. Oh my gosh, my son is this secret thing that's secretly hunted. To protect him, I must leave and never tell him anything so that he's prepared. And how Anakin deals with Samuel L. Jackson. Just take this incredibly resourceful enemy that I've had, who's been made very clear as pretty much the unkillable paladin, and I'll just put him in a cave somewhere. Either he'll find a way out and continue to hunt me down, or he'll die of starvation. Right? If you want to kill him, drop him from orbit, or take him to the bottom of the ocean. And I don't know why you didn't do either of those things to start with. But anything short of doing that is not going to give you any closure on this. He's still coming after you. You've given him no reason not to. You've done nothing to change his belief because his belief is ridiculous. I'm done. I'm just gonna